My name is David Hayes, and this is my final for CSCI-210 Intro to Linux. I've prepared a video walkthrough of the documents I took screenshots of. It shouldn't take very long. And we start by opening our VMware workstation and creating a new virtual machine just by clicking on Create New Virtual Machine. We're going to choose the typical install and click Next. Before we started, we downloaded the Debian 12.7 ISO file so that we could use it during our install. We choose that for our image, our ISO image, and clicked Next. I named mine Deb12 Final _ David Hayes just to make it easy. And then we click Next after we name our virtual machine. I'm choosing a 20 gig. I don't have a lot of memory on my disk, unfortunately, at this moment. Store as a virtual single disk. I just chose the standard 2 CPU cores, CD, DVD, USB controller, sound card. And then we're going to do the regular install here. And that's going to take us to our questions. Now I'm going to choose the English language. And the United States. And hit Enter. American English. And again, host name, Deb12 Final David Hayes. I had to take the underscore out in this case. And just local.domain for the domain name to basically state that we're not going to be hosting it. And did my regular root password, word is VMware 12. And you reiterate that to the system. Clearly that's something I'll change after the fact. Create my new user, Tux. And again, enter the same password I used for root, VMware 12. And reiterate that for the system. Now it's going to ask us about how we want to partition right after we set our time zone, which we are on the Pacific right now. I'll set that. And we're going to use the guided, the entire disk, because we're going to use the LVM manager later. And we're just going to use the standard SCSI disk partition, SDA, for our standard drive, and all files in one partition. That's what they recommend. And we're going to go ahead and write those changes to disk. And now it's just telling us that it's going to partition that disk and asks us how much we'd like to. We're going to choose the whole amount. And we're going to go ahead and write those changes. Now it's installing. Takes a few minutes for this to occur. I won't make you watch the whole thing, obviously. And we are not going to look for more installation media at this point. We are just going to move on. So we click No here. We are in the United States, so we're going to choose that for our package manager. And we're going to use just the standard deb.debian, I don't know, debian.org. And no proxies for this install. And we are just going to choose the SSH server and the standard system utilities because we're going to use a post-install script for everything else. Going to go ahead and use the Grub bootloader because this will be the primary drive. And we make sure we're using the SDA drive that we created previously, the dev SDA. And we're going to reboot here and get back to our entry screen. So we've rebooted. We've logged on as Tux. And we have checked our home directory. At this point, we go ahead and get our IP address using IPA, and that allows us to go to my other system, which is on my HP here, using Ubuntu, and log in remotely. And once we're in remotely, we are going to go to the root and become the root user so that we can install sudo, because we're going to need that in order to do any other changes from Tux. Now we're going to go ahead and modify Tux and give it access and make it part of the group of sudo. And now we can exit, log back in remotely using Tux and update sudo now that we have that permission. And I'm going to use wget to go ahead and pull that post-run install script. And looking at my nmap, it shows that I do have SSH and SMTP and my HTTP, which means I can look at my web page. And there it is. I would like to adjust that later. And we've looked at hosts, so we can make sure that we've got local domain in there, and we do. And look in our bin, make sure that that came over. We have our upit. And I'm going to use wget to pull the for loop over. And now we have the for loop. Yay. And I'm going to check it, make sure it's there, make sure it works properly, go back. You can see all the stuff that came over. My in class, I'm going to use my wget again to get my high text straight from the website. Transfer that over. And I'm going to go ahead and make the for loop executable. And now I can move all of that over to Etsyscale. Make my directories, move my for loop over, move my in class text over, move all my bash aliases, bash rc, bcrc, my funcs, move it all over to Etsyscale just using sudo copy, sudo. And now I can run my check of the directory and see what I've got. And I can also run tree and look. It looks just like what we were looking for to have in our Etsyscale. Got my bash aliases. So I'm going to make sure it works by adding a second user, Tux. I'm going to log out and log back in remotely as Tux2 and just run the for loop. And there it goes. Run calcit. Make sure everything looks like it's working right. Now I'm going to go ahead and go back and exit out and add my next two hard drives. And just use SCSI. And I'm going to go ahead and create a new virtual disk. And it's a 5.0 split into multiple. And we're going to save that one as just the default name. And do it again. And now we have two. And do that, we just hit edit virtual machine, add new hard drive, and there we are. Now we're going to go back in to our system. I'm going to log in as root to make it easier, since most of the changes we'll need to do. We can run our fdisk, format disk -L. It's going to list all the drives we have, and we can see our SDB and SDC. Now we have to format those. And after we format them, they're ready to go. And then we are going to use our PV to make them physical volumes so that they can be managed by the volume manager. And then we are going to add them to the volume group. Data VG. But first we have to create the volume group, data VG, for VDB and VDC. After that, we are going to make them file systems, and we have to make the directories to mount those, and then we're going to mount those logical volumes to the directories we created. Once we've done all that, we'll be able to see the directories using our block list, and then we're going to use our block ID to get our UUIDs to make sure that we have those when we boot up next time. I'm going to copy those to a junk file, and I'm just going to go ahead and make them everything they need to be to put into my Etsy stab file, fstab file. And then I'm just going to go ahead and copy that in. And then I'm going to make my loop to add 10 users. And then I'm just going to run my loop to add those 10 users in. Prior to adding the 10 users, I went in and I grabbed the password from my Tux2 user using Etsy Shadow. And I just, again, catted it to a temp file where I took out everything I didn't need, and then I used the read-in to read it into my my for loop, so that I could create 10 users with the same encrypted password. And after that, I'm going to log back out, log back in from my personal machine into my virtual machine using one of the users I have just created, and it shows that it works. And I have all the users there, and they all have the same password. And I tested a couple of them, and they all work great. And that is the end of my walkthrough. Thank you very much.